Ooh, right there. Right there.
Okay.
That's where Daddy likes it. That's where Daddy likes it. No, don't droop. Don't droop.
Dude, mine's such a piece of shit. I don't know if you spend more money, if it like will droop less, but yeah.
It will. I mean, I got the same one you did, right? That same mic arm.
It was either the same one or I'm sure they're basically the same quality.
I think I got exactly the same one. And yeah, I mean, it's fine for the price. It works, but
Yeah.
you know, one day I'll have a for real studio. So, welcome everybody to See for Yourself. It's the best fucking podcast in the world, being recorded right this very moment about the movie that we're going to talk about. I'm not going to introduce it yet. I actually have something else to talk about. But first, I am going to introduce myself. I'm HardCorey, and I'm coming at you straight out of the mobility scooter capital of the world. And I'm joined tonight by my buddy Chris. What's up, man?
Not much, man. Glad to be here.
Not much indeed. Actually, that's not true. There's a lot going on out there. Have you been paying attention to a lot of things going on? And I'll tell you what, a couple of things have been pissing me off, right? I got a beef that I'm gonna throw out right now. Anthony Fantano, this fucker, he think, look, Anthony, you think that you're out there and you're saying stuff, and your whole thing is that people listen to you and what you say, and they think that it matters and it's important. But I'm going to say that it's just I don't actually listen to anything that you say, so I don't care. So it doesn't matter to me. What do you think about that? Actually, I don't actually. I don't know. I don't know any of his opinions. Have you ever watched any Anthony Fantano?
I can't stand him. He is highly annoying. I especially came to dislike him when he decided. So what happened with him is, what was it? He got like canceled for having like a meme channel.
Hey everybody, HardCorey here. I'm really sorry, but some of our audio at this point got corrupted and I was unable to salvage it. Unfortunately, there's a lot of interesting details about Anthony Fantano's salacious underground life. Not really. There was nothing much to say. Neither of us actually have any kind of true disrespect for Anthony Fantano. And hey, man, if you ever want to be on the podcast, you're more than welcome. The next part, I introduce my true beef, which is with the editing of fail videos. And I missed the first part of it here, but you get to hear the rest of it. And once again, I regret that all of it couldn't be present in whole for the podcast. But you know what? That'll happen. Right? Watching people get hurt, falling off bicycles, falling down stairs, you know?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Crashing their ATVs, right? Getting smacked in the face by a cat. All this kind of, I love it. It's my favorite thing to do on the internet when I can excuse myself for wasting time. Yeah. There's an issue, though, with the way people edit these videos. There's this dumb fucking thing that I think kicked off around the time that Vine maybe got big, where we'll see somebody fall off a ladder or bonk their head or some shit, and like as soon as the sound effect of the impact plays, the video cuts.
Yeah. Yep.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's everything now.
I fucking hate that shit. I want to hear the moans. I want to see some of the aftermath, the sad silence of them in a room by themselves, rubbing their head or their butt or whatever it was that got hurt. I don't want the instant cut. That just, oh man, I have a real issue, and I'm snapping into this Slim Jim and saying that all you fuckers out there that listen to this and edit fail videos, because I know you're out there, Jason, I know you're listening. Get your shit straight.
Yeah, we need epic fails. For an epic fail, you need the whole narrative journey. You know, you need
yes. When a fat guy
you know.
breaks through a trampoline, I want to see the buildup. I want to see his kids, joyful, gleeful at watching their big ass dad bounce around. Then I want to see the rip. I want to see him drop down, smack his knees, bend up his vertebrae, and then I want to hear his wife laughing at him while he flails and struggles to extract himself from the mesh.
Yeah,
okay?
I mean, I want like a 300-page biography on his life, multiple follow-up videos, him,
All right, well, now I feel like I'm being mocked, so we're going to drop this topic and go straight to the movie that we watched today, which is Ink.
Fails. For an epic fail, you need the whole narrative
This is a
journey,
2009 film by a guy whose name I put down in my notes and just don't have the app open at the moment, but what do you know? Now it is. James Winan. No relationship to BB Winan of BB and CC Winan fame. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Really? He was like a gospel Christian soul singer. He was like adjacent to the CCM scene.
What was his name?
BB Winan.
Yeah, I mean, I want like a 300
I bet you recognize one of his tracks, but
multiple
anyway,
follow-up
James
videos,
Winan, no relation, but he did actually compose the whole score for this movie, which is pretty cool. This is not his directorial debut. He had, or maybe it was, I don't remember for sure, but he had done some shorts before this, and then he's done some movies since, and I haven't watched any of them yet. This is the first one I just happened to find through some other materials, recommended it. No advertisement or anything. I'd never heard of this movie through any other way besides like a weird list of Gnostic adjacent films. There was nothing else where I've never heard anybody talk about this in any forum, any kind of recommendation. So kind of an obscure movie, but apparently pretty popular because you can find seeds of it wherever you go. And when I talk about seeds, you know that I mean, I'm not going to say come, but I'm going to say.
You're saying the movie is seminal.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm saying we're done with that. We're done with that. This is let's just get straight into it. This movie looks janky because it's low budget and all the actors are unknown. The soundtrack is good. And I thought the sound design was cool too, like with the teleportation sound effects, the way that people like popped in and out. And the visual effects were okay. There was a lot of like, what do you call that when you have light sources being like real blown out and diffused? Is that called bloom?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that is bloom. I think like bloom is generally like it is that, but it's like everything's got like a blown out aura to it, if that's what you mean.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there was a lot of that. So you know what, the actual film techniques are, let's say, employed with a dubious sense of aesthetic.
All around, every technique, yes.
Everything. It doesn't look great. It was somebody's idea of what looked good, and it's not bad enough that you want to quit watching, but it can be distracting. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And there was a couple times where I got a smirk or even a slight chuckle because it was so bad, but it also, for the most part, straddles that line where it's like bad, at least in like that execution, but not bad enough to be like so bad it's good. So it just not the idea of the movie, but just the acting, the dialogue, stuff like that. Well, the acting wasn't that terrible. The dialogue in a lot of spots was, though.
It's just enough that you notice. It's just enough that you notice. It's amateur. It's definitely amateur. Kind of thing where you're listening to a band's like demo sessions or live albums, and you hear something that you're like, wow, that could have been a lot cleaner. And the thing is, though, in a movie, it doesn't really add to the sense of charm like with a live band's performance or anything, right? Because you kind of, what am I trying to say here?
No, I mean, it's like in video games, where a lot of times the jankiness adds to its charm. Um, I do think in movies, that obviously can add to the charm, but in this movie, I don't think it was more charming because of its jankiness.
Yeah. There's an intangibility to this whole concept. Because when we
Right.
talk about jank, what we're really talking about here is something unintentional, a sort of unintentional artifact of the development that
Yeah.
was overlooked before the production was finalized, right?
Right.
And we're not really talking about that in Ink here, because everything was finalized with a pretty with definitely a vision. This was definitely one person's vision that came out the way that I expect, pretty much the way that they wanted, because they had full and total control over it. But hey, sometimes I understand. I mix and produce stuff that comes out sounding like shit, and when I was working on it, I thought it was fine. But it's only in retrospect that I'm like, could have done a lot better than that. So it's not a deal breaker, basically. And the movie, I reckon, makes up for it because, as I said, this is an individual's vision, and the way that they're able to get you on board with it is really something that you don't see in a lot of movies.
Yeah, I mean, for me, if they would have, or he, or I don't know how much this was solely, was he the director and writer?
Yeah, he did pretty much everything. I mean, he even wrote the score.
Oh, shit. So, yeah, I mean, uh, I felt like the movie, like the pacing was very off for me, and it took a long. It wasn't until about like the very end where the ideas started kind of hooking me. I could have done without the lead up and the action. Like it as an action movie, I felt like it was held back from being like kind of an action movie.
Yeah, it's almost like they could have just deleted the fight scenes, right?
Right, and focused a little more on developing the vague concepts he was kind of going for. Maybe fill out like a little more, like, we'll get into it, but yeah, I really am curious, like whatever those storytellers and whatever the bad guys were, I'm really curious, like what their nature was, what their goals actually were, besides just being like, I don't know, like stealing souls or something. I don't know.
Right. So let's just get straight into it, because I have ideas. I'm going to say a solid 7.5 ideas. That was an Anthony Fantano reference. It was a callback.
Yeah.
So we'll kick off with the cold open, where we meet our protagonist slash antagonist, and his name is John. He leaves his job upset, gets in his car. I wanted to point out a weird detail. I don't know why this caught my eye, but the not the trim, but whatever would be the part of his window, like the edge of the door, when he's getting into it, is like covered with greasy fingerprints. Something about that I don't know really struck me, because a lot of times you see things in movies that look just pristine.
Yeah.
But something about having greasy fingerprints all over the edge of the car door where you'd grab it to close it.
It's all too possible that was just not intentional too.
I totally believe it wasn't intentional, but it's one of those weird things that it says that they didn't look at it. You know what I mean? It says something that they were like, this is just a car. Like, is this supposed to, everybody understands what a car is what a car looks like. This is the kind of things you see on a car. And they didn't care about making it too fancied up. So anyway, he gets in the car and he takes off and has an absolute meltdown, screaming fuck at his steering wheel, and then he gets T-boned. Boom. Pretty Pretty intense opening. We get another scene right after that, and this is where we start jumping times. So it's revealed later on that the conflict that's happening is not necessarily relegated to a consecutive temporal sequence, right? So in this scene, John gets woken up by his daughter. Her name is Emma. He wakes up next to his wife, Shelley. She tells him that it's time to do something, and so he gets up and goes outside to play with her. He's all worn out because he's a workaholic, right? He complains he worked 80 hours that week, but goes outside to play with her anyway, and she is pretending like there's a monster attacking them. And she says, "Build a moat, Dad. Build a moat." And he's telling her, I don't really know how to do this kind of thing. I'm not good at this. This is the kind of thing you should do with Mom," which really paints him as a piece of shit. And I'm pretty sure we both had that exact same reaction, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because Emma is adorable. And like I was saying, if any kid at all comes up to me ever and is like, pretend this with me, I would never forgive myself for shutting them down and being like, no, that's pretend. I don't do that kind of thing.
Yeah, obligation does not get any more obligatory than playing along with a kid.
No, you have to patronize a kid's imagination, because I recall when I was a kid, I would invent all kinds of crazy stuff to pretend, and every time an adult joined in with me, I was blown away. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I have a lot of very distinct memories from being a very young kid and being like, oh my God, like take this zapper. We've got to go do this thing. And if an adult was like handling invisible objects with me and like pretending to play along, I would just be ecstatic. It's an amazing thing. So seeing that was just heartbreaking. But anyway, she pretends to get kidnapped by the monster, and Dad finally gets his shit together and he goes chasing after her, like swinging a stick, pretending to kill the monster. So that was kind of sweet, but it was sad to see him pretend like nothing was going on.
Well, not going to jump ahead here, but I realized at the end, because I thought that scene was just like awkward and it just didn't make sense to me why, like I get he's like a bad dad, but it just seemed like too much. But then I realized that was like foreshadowing for the end.
Dude, not just foreshadowing, that the entire motif of the movie is contained in that scene. Yeah. So this is one of those things that is actually better on a repeat watch, or at least it makes a lot more sense once you get to the end. But anyway, night falls in their neighborhood, and you see a bunch of people teleport into the middle of the street and commit breaking and entering into a bunch of people's houses. This looks pretty sinister at first, but they do this odd thing where their arm kind of glows and they touch people's heads and start bringing them dreams. And all the dreams are pretty happy. These people don't look weird, by the way. They're just kind of, I don't know. I hesitate to use the term, but like alternative dress type of folks. They're not all tatted up or anything, but they're not dressed up in like business cash or anything like that. They one of them touches a little boy who dreams about a girl kissing him, and then he's on stage like Angus Young on his knees wailing on a guitar. And then some of these are actually kind of poignant. There was a woman who dreams about meeting her dad, in her front yard. He just kind of shows up, and she tells him that she thought he was gone. And then there's one that actually made me laugh out loud. There's an old lady. She dreams about winning bingo.
Yeah.
And she's standing on a scale watching the numbers tick down as she's like shoveling a cake into her mouth. So I like that they get, that they worked a little humor into there. Anyway, one of these folks, we're going to see her later on. They're all nameless, by the way. And this is a bit strange. This is what we were talking about, where the cosmology that's built into this world here's a tricky thing. It's esoteric, but it's not confusing, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense at all? I don't know if there's a word for that, but it's one of those things that kind of intuitively makes sense. It's just like, oh yeah, these people, they teleport in and then they bring you good dreams. And one of them is in the room with Emma while she's playing with her stuffed animals. And this is a tricky scene because I was confused at first about the lady who comes to her door and tells her to go to sleep. It's her grandma, not her mom, not her dad. Do you remember that?
I caught that. It seemed like when the dude was in the boardroom or whatever, that like the grandparents took the kid or something. I don't know. I
Yes,
was
that's
confused.
right.
Yeah.
Right. They didn't make it obvious right there. In retrospect, it makes sense that that's her grandma telling her to go to bed, not her mom or dad. But we'll get into it. Anyway, one of these dream bringer people is hanging out in Emma's room, and Emma is not reacting at all. So we know that they're kind of like intangible or spiritual presences, right?
Yeah.
Now I did a little bit of looking for precedents for these types of folks. Obviously, we have Morpheus, right, the bringer of dreams. That's probably the first reference that would come to mind, and he was a. Whew, I'm going to apologize in advance to all of our Greek listeners, however many there you are. I don't know if they have computers over there, if they like installed them into the big pillars of the temples that you've got, or whatever you do on that. Is Greece an island? What's going on over there? They've got at least one island, right?
The isn't it called the Greek islands? I think so.
I'm pretty sure there's at least one island out there. I'm pretty sure there's at least one island. I imagine they at one time occupied territory that was contiguous with the greater landmass. But anyway, I'm going to try to pronounce this in Greek, and I'm sorry, but these offspring of Nyx and Hypnos or Somnus, so the god of night and dreams. They were called the Onidre or Onidri. They were the ones that of which Morpheus was one of them. They're the ones that brought dreams to people, both good and bad, though. So we never actually see one of these folks bring a bad dream to anyone. Some of them are, not, none of them are sad necessarily, but some of them are a little bit melancholic. But most of the time they're happy dreams. So we can just I'm going to guess that that's the closest real life, IRL lore reference that we have for what these people are. But they also exist in another world, and we're going to get into that one later. So for now, we're just going to call them the dream bringers or the dream bringing people. And we do know that they're kind of like intangible, but they can affect people's minds. So anyway, Emma goes to sleep, and then dun dun dun, we see another force appear. These guys are called the incubi, right?
Oh,
Incubus. Okay. That's their name. Yeah, you know who I'm talking about. I'm gonna do my best to describe them. Imagine a Cenobite, right? If you took one of the Cenobites, because they're kind of all like wrapped up in leather and like cords and chains and whatever. But they wear this. Like, how to describe this? It's almost like if you took the glasses. If you took glasses, but you attach just a big screen instead of eyepieces, it's like a big screen that covers their face, and there's like an image projected on the screen that's like kind of a glitchy visualization of their face that's like stuck smiling. Am I doing that justice?
Yeah. I think that's as good as you can get.
Okay. These are the Incubus. I think that they're really cool because they're real creepy and they barely move. You don't really see them walking around and moving with their arms and legs like the dream people do. But they start coming into people's houses as well. And the way that they bring dreams is they've got these kind of like flowy liquid shadows that like drift over people's bodies and take them over and bring nightmares. And so some of these nightmare scenes are pretty brutal. There's the old guy who's dreaming about his wife, like putting a plastic bag over his head and telling him how worthless of a husband he is, and that he's like penniless, and she's gonna go find a man, like a real man. I didn't remember that scene from the first time that I watched this, but this was my second time watching it, and I was just like, ouch, God damn.
That would be, if I had a dream about my significant other like that, that would traumatize me for like a week.
Yeah, that's one of the rougher things that I can imagine. I can imagine dreaming about. Good portrayal though of dreams, because dreams tend to be very weird when you have them. But this is also not necessarily supposed to be like a literalistic representation of dreams, as in like the weird kind of interior visions we have while we're sleeping, right? It sort of crosses over into dreams as in aspirations. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, just like the nightmares are not literal, like the kind of terrifying visions that you have in your sleep, but more of fears. So already we're getting into this weird territory where real life stuff is overlapping with with the psychic landscape and the way that it affects you. But we're about to get way deeper. So, excuse me. Another guy comes into Emma's room now. Ink, the titular character here. Ink is a nasty looking dude. He's all dressed up in raggedy robes, and he's got this big fucking honker sticking out of his hood. I'm talking stupid big. He's all pale. He looks undead, and he's got like chains and ropes and stuff. Looks like they're, he's not necessarily like bound. He's actually pretty agile, but he looks like he's tied up by something. I'm pretty sure that's visual direction. That was definitely intentional. But he's still real nasty looking. He comes into Emma's room and he pokes her in the forehead, and we get a sort of scene where we see a kind of superimposed image of Emma waking up while her body is still sleeping. So it's pretty clear that he's like kind of pulling her, spiritual self out of her body. Did that make sense to you? Did you get that?
I don't remember having like registering that part.
Well, we do see that that's the case later because her physical body does stay there, but
right, yeah,
we can tell that Ink is one of these sort of like spiritual presences or metaphysical presences. They operate by different rules on some kind of other plane, right? It's kind of the traditional spiritual world, human world interaction. We do see later on that the spirits can't affect the physical world, but they do have influence over people's, souls and thoughts. So whatever kind of metaphysical entities these are, Ink is able to pull Emma's soul from her and kidnap her. And he takes off, and a whole bunch of these Dreambringer folks jump in and try to stop him. But he's tough. He's got I think he's got 2 knives. And I don't know if I think he might actually have killed somebody. And we do find out later that these, whatever kind of form these entities are in, they can be killed. So I believe that Ink actually stabbed somebody in the neck during this scene. And this is where we get the first fight scene. And look, these fight scenes are bad because they're not exciting. Does that make sense?
No, my eyes glossed over every time.
Yeah, I was not invested in any of them because there's no real reason for them being there.
No.
We understand we understand, like, it's conveyed that the Dreambringer people were trying to stop Ink. So they have some kind of responsibility for making sure that people's souls don't get stolen, but it's strange that they were not able to convey any kind of tension during the fight scenes. There was no real narration of back and forth. It's pretty much just Ink whooping everybody's ass at this point.
Yeah, I felt in every fight scene, even the last one, it just was dropping fight scene into movie, and it did not do it for me.
No, there was nothing good about him. Here's the thing, though. I was paying close attention this time, and the fight choreography is not bad. There were cool moves, but it's filmed with that real bad style that got to be the standard in the 2000s, right? Yeah. Where the camera is all shaky, and they're just like it averages like 2.5 cuts per second. So you never really get a clear idea of how the fight is flowing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a senseless barrage of action.
Yeah, right. When did that start? Because I recall not Gladiator. Hang on. Was it not Highlander? What was the other one with the Scottish rebels? Braveheart.
Oh, Braveheart. Yeah.
They did that. Braveheart was bad about that, right? With the real shaky camera and all the really quick cuts.
Yeah. Yep.
When was that? Did that come out? That came out in the late 90s, didn't it? Mid 90s?
I'm going to guess 96, but that's a total guess.
It's a pretty good guess. But anyway, it didn't really get much better for a while. I don't know why that became the standard or why people thought that was good, except that it functions as an excuse to not have a good flowing sequence of stunts. Which, these weren't professional stunt people. None of these actors were professional. They all did a good job. Good enough. But anyway, they didn't like any of the fight scenes. Neither of us did because none of them were good. And that kind of sucks. But anyway, there's a big fight scene here in the house where Ink is escaping with Emma. He gets out into the street, and one of the Dreambringer people activates some sort of beacon, which summons a whole bunch of other Dreambringers, and they all chase Ink down the street. But he busts out this looks like a little tom-tom, like a little drum that he does some tapping on with his fingers, and it opens up a portal, and he escapes into the portal. So Emma's spirit has been kidnapped. Kind of a big deal, but we don't really know why yet. And in this next scene, we see John. Now, this is the present. We've had flashbacks before this, even though there was not really a present established. So it's kind of confusing the way that they did it, but it does make sense in the end. We see John at the present, and he hasn't been hit by a car, but he's not living with his family. He's actually alone in an apartment. He goes into the office and he has some bullshit conversation about losing a contract. Apparently he works in sales. You said that the dialogue wasn't good, and I'm not actually going to disagree with you, but when scenes like this happen, I think that they did a perfectly fine job at establishing like what was going on without giving you too many details, because there's something here where he's trying to sell stock to some company and they get undercut or undermined somehow by like a rival organization, and he's trying to come up with a way in order to beat that, and they never go into details because it's not important. They just kind of tell you what's going on. Does that make sense?
Sure, yeah, I agree that the dialogue was functional. I don't think it was good at all, but it was functional, and it didn't throw off the narrative, so that is good.
No, it conveyed pretty much just exactly what you needed to know, but not in a graceful way, or at least not in an entertaining way. There was no fat, but there was no muscle. It's a skinny movie.
Yeah, they had like moments where it was cringe, but it wasn't cringe enough to be entertaining. It was just, Yeah,
it was just like, all right. Yeah. So anyway, with John's living alone, batching it up. We don't really know why yet, but we do see Ink taking Emma through this passage, which I actually thought was cool. Kind of like this. Oh man, what did it remind me of? They call them like the Warrens in the. I know we were talking earlier about the Wheel of Time, but I don't know how much of that I don't know how much you know about, but they have this kind of like passage system called the Warrens, which is sort of like wormholes between areas, but it's like real dangerous in between. It kind of reminded me of that, but it's pretty cool. He's bypassing all these doorways that show, scenes of different locations, and he's looking for a specific one. And when he gets to it, he busts out his little drum to try to open it up, but it's been split. Like the head of the drum has been split, so it doesn't work. So he's not able to use that portal. So we get something of an idea of the mechanics of the cosmology here, because we do see people use the drum later on, but the drums are the sort of the keys that they use to access different portals. Then we get a completely different scene. Suddenly there's a big tone shift, and this is a place that I'm going to say right off the bat, like the adjective that struck me is this looks heavenly, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just like there's this color filter on it where it looks all golden and shimmering, and there's like a bunch of birch trees all over this like beautiful green glade. And we see a woman wandering around, and there's a bunch of children playing with her. And it just looks heavenly. We're not given really any detail about what this place is, but we kind of infer that it is a type of afterlife, right?
Right.
Let's see, and we aren't introduced to the woman yet. We just get a glimpse of her. But it sort of insinuated that she's some sort of matriarch in this place. And we get to see this is actually the girl that was the Dreambringer girl that was in Emma's room when she was playing. She was watching her play. She's all beat up. She's got like bruises and cuts. So it tells us right away that even in the afterlife, you can get injured and you can die. And she meets up with this guy named Jacob. Now, what was your impression of Jacob right off the bat? Not how he ended up being, but what did you think of him when he showed up?
Jacob's the tape over eyes guy, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That is where I really realized that the dialogue was going to be rough. But if there was cringe that was almost entertaining, it was from him. So I gotta say he is my favorite character from the movie.
Dude, mine too. But that was my thought immediately, was just like, I don't know if I can handle this for how corny it is, because he's one of those, like, what even called these kind of, he's kind of like a Jack Sparrow, right? Where he seems to treat everything super flippantly as a really, really thin veil over his competence.
Right.
I don't know how else to say it exactly, but that's the type of character he is. And he does have electrical tape over his eyes, which is really, really funny design choice. Otherwise, he looks pretty normal. He just kind of looks like a hobo. But that is pretty funny. He gets introduced to the girl, the nameless Dreambringer girl. He makes fun of her for getting beat up, and so she knocks him down, and then he says, "Oh, there we go. I just wanted to make sure that you knew how to fight." and then he accuses her of harassing the handicapped. But he always does this thing where he's counting aloud, like a 1, 2, 3, 4 beat.
Yeah.
And it just seems like a weird quirk. You don't really find out what the meaning behind that is until way later, but he just keeps doing that. So I do like a mysterious character with real distinct quirks like that. It's just that I don't know if it was I don't think his actor necessarily did a bad job with what he had to work with either. I'm just going to say it could have been much worse. This could have been a lot worse. It's pretty silly, but it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, I because he was the most entertaining part of the movie, if they would not have had him, I don't think I would have been able to be as invested, especially leading up to towards the end. I was like, okay, this is cool. But he was the one guy that was like, hi. Well, in tandem with his character too. Like once you figure out his like mechanic or whatever, it's like, oh, this dude's actually a badass. And like, him being a badass, super power dude kind of brings all that into 3D.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. He tells the nameless Dreambringer girl that they're going to get Emma back, and she points out that they can't affect the physical world, but he says that he's got a plan to shake the shit out of her, which is this is like Stephen King type of foreshadowing, where you have like this one weird specific phrase that doesn't really seem to make any sense until it's contextualized later to be like a motif. Not even a motif because it doesn't really repeat, but it's sort of just like this weird hidden message that doesn't make any sense at all until a big reveal later on.
Right.
So anyway, they take off together, and Ink, meanwhile, he's taking Emma through the city. She tries to call for help because there are all these people walking by. So she finds out that nobody can see her or hear her or feel her touch. So they're clearly in like the spiritual realm. And she doesn't have any shoes as Ink is dragging her around. So there's this one scene here where we start to get a glimpse into Ink's character. He's a dichotomous character. much like John, and he rips off parts of his robe and wraps her feet up to try to protect him. And then he, because he can't get into the place that he wanted to due to his broken drum, he takes her into this weird room to meet an incubus. And this room has a lot of squares. Did you notice all the squares?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that is. I don't think that was just a spur of the moment kind of throwaway thought, but we'll get into it later. He tells the incubus about his problem. The incubus gives him a code, and he says that he calls it an assembly code, and he tells him that there are some others that he's going to have to go find, and they're owned by these by drifters, is what he calls them. And he says that that'll give him access to the assembly, and then he mentions that if Ink fails, it's because he will have taken too long to deliver Emma to the assembly. And he specifically says he'll miss his one opportunity to become numb. So we see what is happening a little bit here, that Ink is tormented and he intends to get rid of his pain by numbing it. Okay. That's a big moment, but we don't really know exactly how big it is until later. Then we go back to businessman John. He is killing it at work, but absolutely doesn't seem happy. I do have to give credit to John's actor for how intense he portrays his like businessman persona, while also conveying how frustrated and and tormented he is internally. Right.
Yeah, his performance in general wasn't bad.
I don't believe it. They've got a doomsday machine.
Yeah. Whoa, spoiler alert, buddy. But you're right. It did
Edit
come
that
off.
Out.
All right. Okay. All right. But yeah, no, exactly. I think you're right. He doesn't have it is a problem with the makeup. It is a problem with the makeup.
Yeah.
And the costume and just the lack of the bodily emoting and things like that. But right. he did fine with what he had. So a guy named Ron comes into his office, and we sort of find out from context clues here that Ron is his father-in-law, right? It doesn't take a genius to figure that out. But John is not happy to see Ron. He's got a lot of bitterness toward Ron, and he accuses him of taking Emma away from him. Ron is trying to tell him that Emma has had a seizure and is now in the hospital in a coma, and it doesn't look good for her because she could turn over into cardiac arrest anytime. And he pleads with John to come see his daughter. John tells him to fuck off and that Emma is not even his daughter anymore because of Ron. So here we see a real piece of shit dad moment, much like we did earlier, but to a way, way greater degree. And we get some context for his bitterness. It's not super clear during this conversation, but right after this, we get a little bit of background that John's wife died. So there, later on, we will see, and I don't need to get into this detail later on. I'll just drop it right now. But later on, we do get to see that after his wife died, Shelley was her name. Shelley's mother and father determined through a court proceeding that because of John's absence from home, his workaholism, and drug use, which we never actually see him actively doing drugs. There's like a brief flash where it's kind of implied that he's doing coke in the bathroom, but we do see him drinking a lot and coming home drunk at least once. And then Shelley telling him that he's doing that too much. So it's pretty clear what's going on there, but they get custody of Emma. So John has not been in her life for at least a little while since Shelley's death. And he's very bitter about that. And we find out that that's one of his main troubles, is basically blaming other people for what happened to him. But we're not going to get into details of what that means until just a little bit later. So we do see a flashback after this where, we find out his wife is dead, where he's rising astronomically at his sales job. We see that Shelley is unhappy with him being at work all the time. And during all this time, we hear whispers of an incubus. We recognize the incubus's voice by this point, right? Because Ink has already met one. And the incubus is whispering all this stuff to John about how such as he's above these people and they don't deserve his attention or sympathy, and they've been dragging him down and trying to sabotage him, right?
Yeah, this part reminded me. I've been listening to this conspiracy podcast, and
oh, hell yeah, here we go.
Yeah, a couple times I've heard them. They're like Christians, but into like all sorts of, conspiracy and esoteric stuff. And I've heard them mention a couple times that apparently humans only have like 10% or even less than that of like organic thoughts, and that like most of all our thoughts come from mostly like demonic, but sometimes like angelic forces. And the whole theme here of how they influence the mind, I thought that it reminded me of that, and I had me thinking about, especially did we already cover the part where he was talking about this is where he got in a car accident. How did he say it? About how he everybody is just reacting, right? And did we cover that part?
Oh, where Jacob does his whole orchestration, that comes a little bit later.
Okay, we'll wait till we get to that part then.
But I do want to say that's a conspiracy theory. That's the sound of the air quotes whooshing past you about how human thoughts are either, somewhere between 0 and less than 100% organic, right?
Yeah.
You have a lot of different ideas about where they come from, but I know this is a thing that is kind of ironic to say, but that I've thought about a lot, because where do ideas come from? Like, are we pulling them from some kind of psychic ether that we're all, floating in, like some kind of energy field that just kind of shifts in and out of physical manifestation, like a quantum like it was in a quantum state? Or, is it that we are all meat puppets and there are just phantoms everywhere trying to, in like a hacking war for our OS? Or like, I don't know what the fuck is going on. But I have heard a lot about that, and it's interesting. I'm sure that Mr. Winans, the director here, was not totally coming up with all this out of the blue, although, by the same token, it wouldn't surprise me if he did, because what is the blue after all? But it wouldn't surprise me if he was just describing these kind of things, because they're not. This concept is not strictly limited to Christian esotericism, but there is a lot of overlap between the types of spiritual warfare class of esotericists and conspiracy theorists, and then just straight up Christians who think outside the box. So, yeah, anyway, we'll get back to, sorry, I did lose my place in my notes because I got excited, but
that was my bad.
No, not at all. It was because of the incubus whispering to him. I wanted to say, yes, the way that I cope with having no idea of what the fuck is going on inside my own head is kind of the, I guess, the Jungian interpretation, where there's neither a clear inside or outside. That's kind of like a dichotomous. It's an illusion of dichotomy, right, between the interior and the exterior. So the demons that are whispering things to us only appear to be separate because we haven't integrated them. They're inside of us, and we've sort of insisted them in their own kind of compartment, and imagined that they're an other, some kind of separate entity from because we don't like the things that they say, and the idea is that we admit to ourselves, confess to ourselves, and come to terms with the fact that they are our own thoughts, and that these devils and demons that try to mislead us are not coming from somewhere else, but that they are a part of us that we simply decline to recognize because we pride ourselves in being not like them, right? Which is kind of the theme of this whole movie.
Yeah, ultimately I'm agnostic on the whole inner outer division. I think there's like two points to that. Like one is act as if, like if it's effectively external, it seems like it, you might as well act as it is, But at the same time, it's interesting. Like if you were to say that they're projections, if you start breaking down like the whole I and thou and all this stuff to its finest parts, you a lot of times, you get to the whole everybody is, or everyone, all that stuff. So I think that if you follow that train of thought far enough, you end up coming back to these, more esoteric platitudes almost.
No, I agree. It seems to me that the more granular you try to get, the more it turns out to be all one and the same. The more it all kind of starts to wash together. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I think that's what you're saying, right? Yeah. And I do appreciate that this movie doesn't necessarily come down on one side or the other. Like there's not a world of demons who are just out to get you, and there's not a self, with like an AT field, like completely encased in its own ego that is immune, or not immune. I'm sorry, I meant the opposite of immune. That is vulnerable to these exterior influences like magnetic fields as they just kind of drift through a mechanical reality like leaves on the wind, but rather that there is at the root of everything self-determination, which is that's kind of the only real I was religious, I suppose you could say, point that's taken a hard stance on in this movie, but not in a way that I think makes a lot of sense, and I like the way that that's portrayed, regardless of how you really feel about it. But anyway, at this point, the matriarchal woman who we first see in that world of golden birches, it's the word that came to mind when I saw that was Elysium. Isn't that like golden fields that
I know
warriors went to after they died?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that I don't know why that, but that was immediately the word that popped into my head when I saw this. So it is strange, right? What kind of power this imagery has to evoke these concepts? Because like I wasn't raised with that kind of religion, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or belief in afterlives or anything like that. But I've heard of it. I've read about it. Never done any study, and I've never had any faith in it. But it is interesting that when these kinds of images pop up, it's you can just automatically glean what they mean by it, which is one of those kind of real weird, ineffable strengths of a movie like this.
Right. It's intuitive. It's either that there's some sort of archetype going on, or the meme sphere has so much charge to the image that you're able to intuit that as well.
Yeah, right. And what is an archetype anyway, besides just like a Super Saiyan egregore,
Yeah, exactly.
Whoa. Let's not get into that, but I did have a bunch of thoughts. I did have a bunch of thoughts on that all of a sudden, but that's just some dumb bullshit that I thought of. Anyway, we do see the matriarch woman pop up here and confront Ink to try to save Emma, it looks like. They get into a fight, and it looks like she might be able to whip Ink's ass right here. Yeah. But he reveals that he planted a bomb inside Emma that would kill her. And remember, we've already established that a person's soul, which is, and that's just the shorthand that I'm giving this right now. There's not really, they never clearly state that like a person's soul inhabits their body and it's a separate thing, or any kind of, dualistic perspective like that. But it's, you can think of it that way, or you can think of it more that all of this is more or less allegorical, which is what the interpretation that makes more sense to me, right?
Right.
If your soul dies, then that's essentially the cessation of your sense of self-determination, even if it is just a sense, right? The eye that observes the eye kind of thing.
Well, it's interesting because you said that the bad guys, the assembly, is that just where they like get together, or is that like the name of like the Borg or something?
Yeah, that we'll get into that later whenever we get to Ink's encounter with the assembly, because I do have thoughts on that. But what were you going to say? Because you're right, the assembly, it's not clear whether it's just like the group of them or if it's some kind of event, but it is a whole bunch of incubi.
Right. Where, well, you were just talking about the cessation of your individual consciousness, and when they're like, well, we don't want to skip too far ahead, but just the idea of the assembly, like, again, what is their nature and end goal? Is it the sort of thing where to like become one with the assembly is like, the dissolution of consciousness into like, fragmented hive mind or something?
It is something like that. I think that it is actually an excellent portrayal of what we understand to be evil as like the concept. So, but we'll get into it whenever he does confront the assembly and we have some more of the cosmology fleshed out here. But
I just had a aha moment. We'll get to it, but yeah.
Okay, hold it for sure. Don't forget it, because I do want to talk about it more when we get to the assembly. But anyway, the matriarch here, I don't know if we find out yet, but I'm not going to refer to her by that because they don't call her that in the movie. They call her Liev, Liev, Liev or Liev. I think it's just Liev. The Liev, the storyteller, is what they call her. And so during this fight, it looks like she has the best of Ink, but then he reveals that he put a bomb in Emma, and so Liev stops fighting, and she says, "Take me in her place." And Ink beats the shit out of her and is like, "No, I'll just take both of you." So Liev's plan seems to have backfired tremendously, but she also seems to have some kind of idea that that things are going okay, because she's oddly optimistic about the whole thing. Yeah. In the meantime, here, John gets a flashback of himself as a kid, and he's being mocked for being raised in a poor family, right? And during that flashback, once again, we get the whispers of the incubus telling him that he's being humiliated by these people, and basically like, "I'll show them all," right?
Yeah, it was the bus scene. Yeah.
Yeah, the bus scene. He gets dropped off by the bus, and he's going back to this ramshackle farmhouse, and then he's in like a supermarket, and his mom is paying with food stamps. Yeah. So we do see that his workaholicism is a compensatory effort, right? It's pretty obvious at this point. In the meantime, Jacob has found John, but they see that John's already got an incubus on his trail, and he's got 3 of these dream bringer folks with him, and they're kind of astonished that there's an incubus out in broad daylight following John around. And we also see at this point that this is one scene where John walks out of his office, which is the same scene that happens at the beginning of the movie right before he gets into the car crash. So this is making it evident that what's happening here in this conflict is taking place kind of outside of the normal temporal sequence that mortals are subject to, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Which adds up, because that's how thoughts work. Thoughts aren't necessarily, constrained to the arrow of time, Stephen Hawking's arrow of time, the way that physicality is. So I think that's just, I don't know. I have thoughts on it, but we'll just keep getting through the plot here.
Yeah.
What are we dealing with here? Oh yeah, Ink is searching for the access code so that he can enter the assembly, and he goes to some industrial warehouse and gets ambushed by a dude here who tries to take Emma from him, and Ink pulls a scorpion. He puts a rope on his dagger and throws it at the dude, and "Get over here" is him, like drags him over to him and threatens to kill him. And he says that he needs access codes, and the guy says, "What are you going to pay?" and Ink tells him the payment is your life. And the guy says, no, that's not anywhere near valuable enough. I thought that was really interesting insight into what these drifters are. And I didn't really come to the conclusion until they meet the second drifter, but this guy is clearly greedy. That's pretty much his single characteristic, right?
Yeah.
So my thinking, and this is, well, I have thoughts on it. We'll talk about it more when we get to the second drifter, because it kind of locks in my theory about it. But anyway, Ink is able to convince the guy to give him the access codes by paying him with stones. There's some kind of little rocks in a bag, and the guy seems happy to accept those. The currency of the undead, I don't quite know what those rocks are, but the point is that Ink has a bunch of them. We don't know how he got them for sure, but he's able to pay the guy off. That might have been something that was supposed to be fleshed out later and got cut, but yeah, whatever. Point is, he gets the access code. Anyway, back to John. We see a little bit of John wheeling and dealing and absolutely killing it at the investment firm, right? But he's obviously breaking down internally as things are going better and better for him at the office. Things are getting worse and worse for him personally. We also see that Jacob is observing John still and trying to explain to his companions exactly what the hell he's doing, because they're following him on blind faith, right? I didn't write that down. I came up with that off the top of my head. But Jacob explains that he's starting to explain causality, what causality really is. And he says that a man has a weakness, and that's his flaw. And the flaw leads to guilt, and the guilt leads him to shame. And he compensates for the shame with pride and vanity, which is destined to fail. And when his pride and vanity fails, he's destroyed. So he's kind of insinuating that a flaw is something more like a time bomb, and that humility is the defusing of the bomb. And anything else is basically turning a blind eye to it. That's not said in the movie at all, but it's a thing that we do see and recognize in real life, in ourselves and other people all the time. But that's sort of what he's talking about. Does that make sense? Am I off the rails here? Okay. Then he explains that what his specific capacity as a pathfinder is, because we actually do get a name for his type. Apparently there are more than just Jacob, but he's called a pathfinder. And what he's able to do is sense the chain of causality, right? The arrow of time, the reason why anything happened, which is the thing that came before it and the thing that came before it, and so on and so forth. And as a pathfinder, he's specifically able to basically find like nexuses. Is that even a word? Nexi? I've never tried to use the plural of nexus. So once again, I apologize to our Greek listeners, even though that's not a Greek word. I just want to say I'm sorry for you guys for making fun of you for being hairy and smelling bad. I don't think I ever did that, but just in case. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know about the nexi.
That's okay. We'll call them nexuses because everybody knows what we mean. But it's basically a point in the chain of causality where there are potentials for splitting into different timelines. I think everybody understands what we're talking about there.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Butterfly effect stuff here.
I specifically wrote down butterfly effect in my notes for that, as a reference there. And we see that the reason that he's counting all the time is because he's keeping track of these, what he calls beats. And he uses the timing of his, of the rhythm that he's counting to make sure that he always knows where whatever beat drops, whether he's able to change up, make a adjustment to the causal chain so that he can actually shift timelines. And so that clears up the confusion for the Dreambringers who don't know why they're trying to find Emma exactly, because they know they're not allowed to to affect things physically, which we actually do get kind of a cool visual representation of during that first fight in Emma's house when Ink kidnaps her. I actually failed to bring this up, but there's kind of a cool thing where since they're, WWEing all over the house, they're breaking like coffee tables and windows and drawers and shit like that. But when something breaks, it kind of like splinters into fragments and then it kind of like sucks back together and reforms.
Yeah, I thought that this part was this was the first part in the movie that really piqued my interest. It got me thinking about like the way he finds kind of like timeline pressure points, and he actually reminds me of this one Crowley poem that says something that, or the universe is in equilibrium, therefore he that is without it through his force be but a feather can overturn the universe. And this idea that like it's not about like force, he's in tune with the beat, so all he needs is just like the perfect timing, and through the butterfly effect he's able to cause like key changes. But without that key moment, usually humans are just kind of like mechanical chain reactions, and it's like in these moments, like it's like a mix between like fate, I guess, but then also
he's like synthesizing free will and determinism here.
I thought that was really interesting because it's also these moments that are like deterministic, but then also they serve as like wake up calls to like actually participating in life with like consciousness.
Yes. I think it's especially interesting that it took you 71 minutes to reference Crowley.
Yeah, I was debating it. But that whole like feather overturning the universe thing was just way too on point.
Right. He's talking about that leverage though. And that's Jacob's, as a Pathfinder, his specific power is being able to sense where those leverage points are, because it would be because these people are angelic, sort of, right? Did they strike you as angelic to an extent?
That was because at first I thought they were just like some sort of afterlife dream warriors, but the parallels to like the whole angels versus demon thing was too much. So I'm leaning more towards like maybe angels in this are like you like evolve into angels or something when you die. But yeah, angelic.
I got that. Yeah, I got that idea too, even though they never actually say that that's what happens. But it does seem to me sort of kind of like a Buddha situation, where once you've like achieved a degree of enlightenment, you actually come back to help people.
What is it? Bodha.
It's the Bodhisattva, right?
Yes, thank you.
But yeah, I think that once again, this Mr. Winan here isn't pulling from any one specific faith system, but he's done kind of an interesting theosophical job of synthesizing a whole lot of them.
Well, and I would imagine that a lot of this he was just going by the seat of his pants. I'd actually have to see, I guess, more of his movies to see how studied his approach is. But
that's the thing, right? Because a lot of times you'll see these sort of Gnostic systems, by which I'm just throwing that word out there willy-nilly, but what I'm really talking about is this. Look, you know what? Fuck it. Let's dive into it. The way that I conceive of Gnosticism as a systematic sort of perspective, by which I mean you take some tenets as given, and then you build from there, right? What the way that I conceive of it is that the fundamental part of it is accessing a sort of inherent understanding that is uncomfortable to come to, only because there are so many more pleasant options that distract you from that inherent understanding. Is that vague but specific enough? Because I'm trying to be both.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of like the demiurge and all that is, it's like the Matrix essentially in a one package there.
Yes, but you'll see this notion played out in a lot of media that it's very obvious that these guys don't have a background in studying, Gnosticism per se, right? So and the weird thing is that kind of lends credence to the notion that it is an interior inherent understanding that you have to anybody. I almost sounded like that kid in the meme. Do you ever have a dream where you could that you wish you could? But what I'm trying to say is that you'll see this pop up, this idea that there is an inherent truth that will free you in some way, but the challenge of accessing it is to face uncomfortable truths and come to terms with those parts of yourself that it is much more pleasant to disregard.
Yeah, I'd say that Gnosticism in spirit is very much like about facing your shadow type stuff and integrating it, though not necessarily, maybe more on a cosmic level usually than like personal, like Jungian shadow integration or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can also see it as one and the same, but
yeah, for sure.
What I was trying to say is that you will see this pop up in people that have no association with any kind of Gnostic society or faith group.
Yeah, I think there's a reason why, like, for example, movies and like, a lot of times movies, they'll refer to it as like very Gnostic. Like I've heard people refer to David Lynch movies as Gnostic or Twin Peaks or whatever. And I don't think a lot of times, maybe even most of the time, there's like a studied any amount at all of like studied Gnosticism. It's just like it's inherent, I think, whether it's cultural or within our just like humans. There's something intuitive about it.
Well, and I mean, that's exactly what it's saying too, right? It's kind of the most organic belief system that we've got, I recall, oh man, I'm going to fuck up the name. I'm going to fuck it up. I apologize to all of our Taiwanese listeners for fucking this one up, even though this guy isn't from Taiwan. I'm sure I've said something in the past that was probably offensive to you, so I'm sorry. But I think it's Terry. Oh, you know what? Fuck it. The book is The Sword of Shannara. The Shannara series was a fantasy series from, I don't know, man, the 80s or 90s, something like that. I read it when I was a kid, but it's about an elf boy who gets adopted by a human dad and has a human brother, and he goes off on an adventure to defeat some kind of lich king or some sort of, just general bad guy, and who is undead and can live forever, and he's like controlling monsters. And the only thing that can defeat him is this thing called the Sword of Truth. And so the elf dude hero, goes to find the Sword of Truth. And when he finds it, what he finds out, the only magical power that this sword has is it dispels illusions. So when he grabs hold of it, he has to come to terms with all this traumatic baggage that he has about being an elf, a different species adopted into the human world, and all this compensation that he's done for being abandoned by what he considers his rightful people, and only by acknowledging the way that he has been suffering because of his unwillingness to deal with all this like disparity between loyalties in his life is the only way he can wield the sword. And so when he goes to confront the big bad guy, all he has to do is touch him with the sword and, dispel his illusion of immortality, which is what defeats him. And, that was one of the first times that I came across something like that struck me as just like makes perfect sense. You know what I mean?
Did you say that the author's name is Terry something?
Terry Goodkind or
Oh,
Goodkind?
yeah. I thought that maybe because I've read I don't know, the first 2 or 3 way back in high school of the Sword of Truth series, and I think maybe what I got confused is I think maybe you got some of the details wrong. Like he's not an elf, I'm pretty sure, but
No, it's not the Sword of Truth.
Okay.
That's a different series. I fucked that up. This is called the Shannara series. And I think the first one was just called The Sword of Shannara. And I think that Terry Goodkind is a completely different author. So I honestly shouldn't have said anything. All I was trying to say was that I have noticed since I was young, because I was like, 12 when I read this stuff, that that idea that truth is uncomfortable to approach, sort of like how, all things are revealed in the light, and that it's a weakness of ours to shy from that.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Okay. Well, anyway, sorry for that. That was I'm not sorry.
We're gonna have to start putting just like a disclaimer before, so that way you don't have to like apologize or to all the different minorities or future listeners, and we'll save some
That's a good
time.
point. I want to apologize to Mexican immigrants right now.
Perfect.
Because I've made a lot of Home Depot jokes, but I have no idea what it's like to have to work that hard, just to make a life. I was born into
Yeah.
it, and I actually have a lot of respect for, actually just Mexicans in general, dude. They're pretty awesome. I actually really like Mexicans.
We probably should just like take all this and write it out and put it as like in our podcast description, like the first thing you see. So it's all.
That's a good idea. Yeah, that's a good idea. We'll go through all the minorities that we've never actually said anything bad about, but could potentially offend.
Yes.
And I'll just use that as the episode description for everything from now on.
Thank you.
Okay. So at this point, we see what Jacob's power really is. He orchestrates this crazy sequence of snares, which, by the way, we kind of talked down on how lackluster the cinematography was up to this point, but I gotta say, this was cool as fuck.
Which part?
The part where Jacob finally figures out where the little leverage point was to like influence things to happen.
Oh, yeah, with the with little music box and shit.
Yeah, it's this crazy Rube Goldberg sequence of causing people to bump into each other, drop stuff, trip. And then it all coincides with John getting T-boned in his car as he's headed off to celebrate the big sale that he just made, right? Which is what the cold opening was. We don't really have any context for that until right now. But he gets absolutely slammed, busts up in his car, and there's an incubus waiting next to him. But they all rush to incubus, which causes it to flee. And that gives the Dreambringer girl the opportunity to give John a good dream, finally, because he had an incubus before, so she wasn't able to access him. And we see that he dreams, honestly, something that got me emotionally. Like, I'm not going to lie, there were many parts in this movie that hit me emotionally where I was just like, oh, man, like, I don't want to talk right now because my voice will crack. That kind of level of stuff doesn't normally get me, but like, for some reason, some of this stuff really did. And in this part, he's entering an ambulance where his wife is waiting and she's healthy and sitting there, and he has a very brief conversation with her saying that he didn't know what to do and he's sorry, and she just forgives him. She just tells him it's okay.
Oh, that was his wife? Dude, for some reason I thought it was at that point, I didn't think about it, otherwise I'd been like, duh, but I thought it was his daughter, like her dead future self. But that's retarded. Duh.
No, that was definitely his wife. That was the ambulance she got loaded into. We see in another flashback.
Did they show his wife in an earlier scene and I just missed it?
There is a scene a little bit later that shows her being loaded into the ambulance, all busted up, evidently from a car accident.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's see here. I did have a note on the incubus here. Oh man. Yeah, it got crazy at this point. So my notes are a little bit haphazard, but you know what? This is kind of a haphazard episode, but we're getting a lot of thoughts out.
Yeah.
So thoughts be gone, right? the incubus runs away. I had a thought about why they're called incubi at this point. So you know what an incubus is.
Yeah, aren't they the incubus, and then an incubus is a male succubus, so it's like, well, I know they're commonly portrayed as like sex demons, like sex sleep demons, but I don't know if that's actually, if there's I haven't looked into, the etymology and actual shit like that.
Etymology would have been a smart thing to look into that I failed to do because I was just throwing these notes on when we were watching the movie. But so here's my thoughts. The incubus is, it is like a demon, a nocturnal demon that impregnates people at night. And like the whole thing is that they are trying to sort of create like a human demon hybrid to enact their demonic effects in the human world, right? Sort of the way that grays get you and suck out your juices and use them to make same kind of thing.
I did not know this lore about incubus. The fact that it lines up so well with grays is just kind of mind blowing for me.
Really? Well, yeah. What did you think? A succubus just loves human dick?
Yeah, I thought that.
Yeah, buddy. You know they do.
Yeah, I thought that the common understanding was that basically, like in a Christian world, demons exist just to make you think bad thoughts, basically.
Yeah. Well, so right. So let's not going beyond the literal here. What they're trying to do basically is insinuate their influence, right? So just by having a human demon hybrid baby, that is one way of explaining how they do that. And obviously this is not really happening. Like there's not actually, women aren't just like randomly getting pregnant without having sex with anybody and then giving birth to a human demon hybrid. Although that is kind of a cool concept that I'm going to think about.
Haven't you ever seen Rosemary's Baby?
Actually, I haven't, but that is kind of an inversion of the Immaculate Conception, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
In the movie, it's like the incubus is literally like Satan, but and that's like the Antichrist baby. But yeah, same idea.
Yeah, and they're also this is something that pops up in a lot of Japanese media, anime, video games, and stuff. Inuyasha took off in a big way, but it's pretty common to have a human demon hybrid offspring who Yu Yu Hakusho. I'm pretty sure he was he's raised by a single mom. He had demon blood in him. So he goes off to conquer the demon world at the end, or fuck it, Dragon Ball Z. There's aliens breeding with humans and creating some kind of
I've heard of a lot of people talking about how anime and the Japanese are always on that Nephilim shit.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even think of the Nephilim, but yeah, there's maybe one
and then you had
example.
Yeah, and then you had like Chinese. I think it might just be Chinese, but it could be Japanese too. Talking about like the Dragon Kings, where they were like bloodlines that like had dragon in them and shit.
This is something I have to look up. I've never heard of that.
I don't. I could be remembering how literal the dragon part of that is, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
So that leads me to a question that's been on my mind for a long time, actually. And I'm not trying to get too personal, but would you fuck a dragon if you're like, because like it's gonna be nasty and rough, but if you could be like, yeah, I fathered this offspring and it's like some kind of crazy hybrid creature,
like a reptilian. So
I don't know if it'd be a reptilian for sure, but maybe it would be good at like football and you could support you as you age.
Would it be able to shapeshift? Because I don't want my kid to like socially struggle. That's why
that's a good point.
That's why I would not. I wouldn't homeschool my kids because I just want them to like be socially acclimated, and I feel like a dragon child might. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know about that.
Homeschool kids, they do tend to have that lack of charisma that leads to, you know, struggling with podcast hosting and stuff like that. But I'm going to say you can't shapeshift, because that would make the actual conception of the hybrid offspring unfair, because then you could just have the dragon turn into a human woman or man.
Well, I
I'm
mean,
not trying to be exclusive.
Yes, now you understand why reptilians are bullshit and it's not fair.
Oh my fucking God.
Yeah.
Yeah, great point. But anyway, what I was saying about the incubus in this movie specifically and why they're called that, because we don't see them, you know, we do see them coming in the night to give nightmares to people. We don't really see them impregnating people. In fact, they, like, the first one that gets nightmared, I think, is a man. So what I reckon is going on here is that we'll get deeper into it later, and it'll kind of support my theory about why they're called that. But what they're out there to do is they are still trying to make part of their how to say this. They're still trying to insinuate an aspect of themselves into normal everyday human life to validate their own negativity and sort of their discarding of their own, not just self-worth, but remember talking about like the soul, right? Like the eye that sees the eye, like the part of yourself that actually has a belief in self-determination.
Right.
They have discarded that already, and they need the support and validation externally of seeing others do that in order to continue doing it themselves. So it becomes this destructive cycle of needing to push other people into the same negative state that you are in order to accept that you can maintain that negative state.
Yeah, I'm trying to think like how that would make sense, you know? Like,
We'll have like, look, misery
mechanically.
loves company.
I suppose. I feel like it should have more to it than that.
I think that it's just straight psychology. I don't really think that there's anything more mechanically. I think that that's just what they do. And what we see is that people do choose this. They do choose to become an incubus, because these are, you know, post people that have discarded their sense of self-determination, right?
Right.
And obviously they basically get rid of the aspect of themselves that feels guilt or shame or anything, because that aspect has come to dominate their lives. And so all they can think of is eliminating it rather than accepting it. And so they sort of internally dichotomize themselves, and what's left over is sort of just a husk that subsists on the suffering of others in order to justify their own suffering. And, you know, think about this in terms of people, you know somebody that does this kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah. I'm trying to, you know, extrapolate that to make it like a cosmology that just, you know, kind of fits together in my head. I'm pretty sure I'm just, you know, I got to take a step back to do that, but we'll just continue talking to see if it comes together for me.
Yeah, I think it's just a flat out articulation of what we perceive as evil, because evil is ultimately just pointlessly destructive. Actually, not it's ultimately pointless, but its destructiveness is in order to perpetuate itself. It's something that it's cancerous. It just feeds and feeds in order to perpetuate itself before it burns out. There's nothing creative or you know, reconstitutional to the effects of that kind of evil.
Yeah, I think that's probably you know, that's grappling with evil and the nature of evil is like, in fiction especially, is like the most, like, it's the biggest task that fiction usually has, is like convincingly portraying evil, its motives and its nature. So That's why you see so often that it's just like, well, he's just a cartoony villain, and he's evil because he's evil. And so I guess that's essentially just what I'm having a hard time here, is I'm not understanding what the assembly, or what is that what they're called? The assembly? No, they're called.
Yeah.
And they have, I had the one thought we were talking about or I was wondering if the assembly is like a Borg or something, and then the whole thing is like rejecting self-determination. And I wondered, it just had me think about how we talked about this, about how like evil and fear, it's like insects, it's like the fractalization of consciousness. So I had thoughts that were parallel to that, going with this idea of the assembly of like, a hive mind, like a bunch of bugs that are all, they've all been infinitesimally like separated, but one at the same time. So they're like, there's never any sort of like unity, but they all, move together without actual consciousness.
Yeah, like a network of mindless cells. We'll get there, because I do have ideas about the assembly specifically, but I'm going to drop that bomb later on. Truth bomb. Cool. Whoa. Anyway, yeah, that's been my conception of evil for a long time, though, is basically a cycle of kind of a black hole type thing that not never scratch that. Black hole is bad, but fire, basically something that destroys to subsist. That's all.
Okay.
That's all. Like a self-perpetuating thing that has no actual purpose other than, to perpetuate itself. And in the process just destroys.
Well,
cancer and fire are the two closest analogies I can come up with.
I guess cancer is the obvious one. I'm just trying to think, we don't need to get into this, but the disconnect I always come to is like, okay, so evil feeds itself and perpetuates itself by destruction, but how is it being perpetuated? How is it's I don't know.
Well, right. I mean, that is the tricky thing, but it's basically by any means necessary. And it just so happens that those means always are destructive. Because think back to where it originates. I mean, it was explicated by Jacob earlier on, where he says that it comes from a person perceiving their weakness and feeling shame for their weakness. And then feeling guilt about that shame, and then using pride and vanity to mask it. And because that's only a mask, the guilt and shame continues growing. So that all that you can do is keep, attaching new masks, building and building and building upon that mask until it just becomes too much to bear, and then it collapses.
Okay. Yeah, I'm following now.
Okay. And in the process of building those masks, you're harming other people.
Right.
And that's what defines evil. Wearing a mask is not like a performance mask where you're just pretending to be something else to express something. It's the opposite of expression, actually.
No, it's like a mask when you put drywall over a wall. You're masking it.
Yeah, something like that. It's to hide. It's like putting drywall over rotting, support beams.
Yes.
I don't know what they're called. I don't do construction, but yeah, it's covering something. It's covering something up to avoid dealing with the root issue.
Yeah. Yep.
And you can only do that so long, because if there's rot that you don't, that you don't repair, then it just continues to rot. But evil is the process of basically perpetuating the rot for as long as possible by pretending it's not there. And we see that in the incubus here. And all I was trying to say was that I understand why they're called incubus, because the way that they perpetuate themselves is by doing the same thing. And you understand what I mean by perpetuating themselves is their goal is numbness. Their goal is to not feel, right?
Sure.
So there's this sort of tragic irony that the means by which they perpetuate their numbness is by causing harm to others, which would normally cause anguish to themselves. But in order to avoid causing anguish to themselves, they harm others. So that's what I mean by the cycle, right?
Okay, that is right there, the crux of what I was trying to get some clarity on, as far as at least like a theory on what the motivations of, the bad guys in this was. So I guess that could make some sense, that through, being evil, it separates you further from, that painful truth, and become numb.
Yes. Yes. It's not, nobody ever sets out to be evil. Nobody ever makes a decision like, I think my life would go better if I were evil. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just a consequence of, unwillingness to face, the light of truth, to have the things that shame you exposed.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. And I think that, but yeah, that was not tangential. I'm trying to tie it back to the reason that they're called an incubus is because of that perpetuating nature. It's because they are rapists, really. Like we see this. I'm gonna swerve from that term specifically because we're talking about Emma here, but that's what they're doing, is attacking people in their sleep and using them using their unwilling consciousness to perpetuate and affirm to themselves, affirm the illusion that what they're doing doesn't matter, so that they can't feel the shame and guilt, and they see themselves as becoming perfected, which we see in just a minute here. We'll get back into it where, right, John just got T-boned in the car. Sorry, that because of the way that this skips around in time and stuff, it's complicated to find where I was, but John just got hit in the car. Now we go back to Ink, and Leave tells him that she knows that he killed himself, and that's why he is where he is. And he says that he's trying to get rid of his scars. His scars will go away when the assembly lets him be an incubus. And in order to be an incubus, he has to sacrifice Emma. So we've already seen, and once again, we'll go back to the portrayal of the incubi, where they are wearing a sort of like projective screen as a mask that shows a constant smiling face, right? I mean, how much more dead on can you get?
Yeah, there we go with the masks. Yeah.
Okay. So this gives me the idea that I wasn't able to find a good reference point for this, but it's another one of those things that makes a lot of intuitive sense. But Leave is so gentle with Ink, even to the point where she's unwilling to call him bad. Like, remember, there's a point where Emma asks, when they first meet, Emma asks Leave if she's good, and she says, yes, I am. And she asks if Ink is bad, and Leave says, well, he's not good. Like, she won't call him bad or evil or anything like that. She has so much faith in him. So she represents some kind of perfect, like, mother archetype, right? Even as the storyteller, she is so nourishing and all about bringing development to people and encouraging them to pursue, what they, their own sort of Nietzschean will to power, right? Like we see with these people in their dreams. Some of them are illusory, of course, and it's a kind of a weird way of saying that sometimes illusions can be pleasant and harmless. But you see the boy playing baseball or playing guitar in his dreams, and we see that these people are dreaming of tangible things sometimes. So, yeah. And you know what? Moms lie too to make you feel better, and that's not always a bad thing. They're not doing it in a malicious manner. So.
Sure, that's life, in a nutshell. Like, life can still be fulfilling even if every, desire that you can imagine is, a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow that you're never going to get. But still, through the whole winging through life, there's fulfillment and enjoyment that you have by chasing these illusory, goals.
Absolutely. Or just thinking about good things is an aspect of self-determination. Thinking, even if it's not true, I can do that. I can do that. Like, that's the kind of thing that makes you actually do things in the first place, just trying. So,
right.
Yeah, this is where I got this sense that she was some kind of a mother archetype, and I failed to come up with a real life referent, and I shame myself, and I will commit seppuku later on with, I'm trying to find something sharp in reach, but I don't really have anything. There's some Lego pieces nearby. I might try to find one of those later.
Is seppuku, is that where you like kill yourself by choking on your own turd or something? Seppuku? Is that actually how you pronounce the real word? I can't remember.
Seppuku is what it sounds like, but It does involve a turd. It's just you don't choke yourself with it.
Oh, you ever seen the movie The Puppet Master, where they have that one puppet that like kills people by like shitting a turd from puking up a turd into their mouth, and somehow it kills the people in their sleep?
I haven't seen that one.
I'll have to link you up.
Okay. I thought that was well, now I know where that you know what? I'm not going to say that. No, that is an interesting one, though. That might be one we have to watch because that sounds pretty crazy. Anyway, at this point, Ink and Leave and Emma find the next of the drifters, right? Who hold the access codes that are the assembly codes that Ink needs. So this is a woman, and she's obviously totally obsessed with vanity. She's wearing a big floofy dress, and she puts on a wig, and she's got all kinds of wigs and dolls all around this room that's real glitzed up, right, with like lace and curtains and stuff laying everywhere like that. This is the point where I realized what these drifters really, what they really were. These are just earthbound spirits. These are just people who have died, and because of their vices, were unable to pass on to the afterlife, either heaven or hell, or however you want to conceive of it. Yeah, that's all there is to it. You find these in every faith practically. There are earthbound spirits, and the reason is either because they have some kind of vengeful notion that they can't let go of, or because, and we talked about this actually in the Gaunt's Zero episode. I think at time of this, the time this is released, it's going to be over a month ago. But we talked about Japanese oni and their different demons and spirits, and how many of them come from specific traumas that occurred at the death of the person that manifested as a ghost or a monster or demon. Yeah, and just because they're unable to let go.
You got like in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the hungry ghosts, and they have they say something like people that were too self-indulgent. They were gluttonous. They in the afterlife they basically have like what was it? Something like you can't get enough of anything. Like you cannot satiate your hunger no matter what, or something like that, where it's just like impossible to whatever vice you had, it becomes like exaggerated to an extreme where it's impossible to even somewhat satisfy it.
Yes, exactly what I'm talking about. Being stuck to feed. I guess the contemporary, because that is one of those kind of more like obscure archetypes, right? But they do exist in the even in the present day. They manifest as like the zombie fascination, right? Yeah. We see that same kind of thing. People will waffle on about how it's a representation of consumerism and stuff like that, but that's also just a little aspect of this this vice. And man, there was a manga that I read when I was a kid called Jing, King of Bandits, and he ran into some people like this, including a dude who would turn into a skeleton after he died, but he just sits. He was a pirate, I believe, and he just sits drinking and drinking and drinking. And he's got like a barrel full of booze under his body, and he just scoops booze out of it and drinks it, and it falls through his ribs and down into the bucket, and then he just scoops more out and keeps drinking it.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. But I think that's what these people are, the drifters. That is.
I will say too, whenever this lady popped up on screen, it was the first time and the only time in the movie that I was almost creeped out by anything. Like there's something that was, I mean, it wasn't actually like creepy, but it was surreal, and I don't know, something about it was almost scary.
It's very. I think it's the environment.
The environment and her, yeah, just like
yes,
her.
they all because they all project like artificiality, and that it's hammered home in a ham-fisted way. Granted, by the way she talks, like she immediately points to Leave and calls her ugly, which is ridiculous because the one playing her is beautiful.
Right.
And then she bargains with Ink and says that the only way she'll grant him her assembly code is by allowing her to take Leave's hair. So Leave acquiesces because that's what she does.
Yeah.
And she does a great job with her haircut.
Yeah, it's like a professional fit cut.
Absolutely. There's no way they were going to make Leave ugly. But they do cut her hair super short right there. Then we get a little scene in the ambulance with John after he got hit by the car. Of course, he's being rushed to the hospital. Jacob and the other nameless Dreambringer girl are chatting, and Jacob is explaining more about how his eyesight was taken from him. He actually specifically says God took his eyesight. Yeah. So that's kind of that is kind of an interesting thing to put in there, where because of Jacob, he's got kind of that jester personality. You could counter it as a turn of phrase, or you might insinuate that there is actually a God operating at a different level from everybody else here, even though it's never actually insinuated any other way. Besides, there's also the other two Dreambringers that are outside the ambulance, and they're kind of sitting on top of it as it's driving. And the guy says something about there's something way bigger going on that the storyteller says we can't see. So, the fact that those two conversations are happening simultaneously, to me, indicated that some sort of insinuation that there is a plan beyond just like the mechanistic determination of human behavior, plus the Pathfinder's ability to shift causality. That there are levels beyond that is kind of what it was suggesting to me. But that just I might be reading too much into it.
No, I don't think it would be coincidental that those two instances were like all together. So
yeah, I don't reckon so, because there wasn't really much coincidental into this movie at all. But anyway, Jacob at this point, he talks about how the reason that he counts is because he's been tuned into the rhythm of cause and effect, so he needs to keep track of it. And the Dreambringer girl, asks if John is going to be all right, and Jacob says he's definitely going to be all right. In fact, it's good for him to get hurt because he thought that he was God, and he needs to be reminded that he's not, which is an interesting perspective into the punitive nature of the patriarchal Old Testament type of God, right?
Right.
Sort of a humbling is needed when people get too big for their britches. Or when not even so much Yahweh or whatever would do that kind of thing, but it basically allow the devil to do that, which actually makes a lot of sense. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, just before I forget, I had a random thought about, when he was talking about how it's all chain reactions, and he does his thing to kind of shock them awake. But like Gurdjieff, he had the idea that, humans are machines, and that almost entirely basically everybody is just reacting mechanically, and it's only through a system of like shocks that and he uses the literal word shocks, that it like jolts you out of your mechanical nature. And only a few people actually exercise free will and choice, and it's through these shocks that it propels you out of your mechanical nature.
Sure. And I mean, I'd be totally on. I mean, I try to, this is one of those things that I think about too much. Once again, ironic that, the intellect can lead one to question the reliability of the intellect. But yeah, that is the thing I think about too much.
Yeah.
I do go back at times and I think, what have I done that was just a completely original idea of my own? The reason that because I like to draw. And the only reason that happened was because I would watch stuff like Speed Racer when I was a kid. And the reason that I like to play music is because I heard music that I liked. There was really, looking back at it, I never had an original idea about anything. I just participated in stuff that was already going on. And, I wonder about the way that other people see that, but not too much, because there are a lot of dead end rabbit holes when it comes to getting into your own consciousness debug menu. So I try not to dwell on it. But at this point, what you're saying makes sense. And then also, I'm surprised that you didn't bring this up, because I was trying to subtly alley-oop this to you. But the whole conceit of like the higher self and like the guardian angel, and then like the Christ consciousness beyond that. These guys are clearly that, right? Like the Jacob the Pathfinder, and then the other dream bringers.
Yeah, I was towards the end, I had more thoughts on that, about the whole idea of the true self, the HGA and stuff. But I do think that was one of maybe the most interesting thought that this movie gave me, and I didn't really have it fully fleshed out, but just kind of, we'll wait till we get to the end.
Sure. But I think that's I think we both hit on that same thing, even though we didn't talk about it. But the whole notion of these guys being sort of like acausal entities, like outside the flow of time.
Yeah.
Sort of because, there's a lot of talk when it comes to the idea of like the higher self being able to bring lessons from your future experiences to your present self and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess because the end is especially where this all came to me, where, it makes the big reveal who John is, and the idea that like his own, it's almost like it made me wonder if the true self here is like if it's, this is just one probable like soul of his, or if it's the summation, like the heaviest, like the worst timeline summation of all his probable selves, because it's like his future probable soul ended up intervening to change his current life to, we're going to spoil our ending.
Well, right. But I do get what you're saying. And that is a super interesting question. And I do wonder, just between you and me, there are so many. Have you ever listened to Hardcore History? Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. Get into it. He actually talks about real stuff. That's a great podcast that will actually broaden your scope of the human condition and teach you about things. And, it's a lot better listening than this. But if you are still listening, I'm going to say, the thing about the different timelines is that sorry, I fell off. I've fallen off. My career is over at this point.
Yeah,
but,
we might have to edit the past 2 minutes out, because I was totally tripping over. I kept trying to I should save it, and then as soon as I try to pull it out.
No, I'm going to Willy Wonka this and turn that trip into a somersault, where I stand up and say, the thing about the multiple timelines potential that's represented in this movie is I think that it is kind of ambiguous on purpose because only one matters because that's all that we know, right?
Sure, yeah, and like you said before, not all, this is not like probably literal. It's like symbolic, and so I don't think it in with a lot of time fuckery movies. A lot of them get lost in the weeds with trying to fuck with your mind about the logics of time fuckery, but I don't think that's the point of this, so really it needs to be taken, but there's certain thoughts, not trying to iron out the time shit, but just certain thoughts that it makes me wonder, just because it would well, it's cool that it even sparks these thoughts, but it makes me, I could have deeper thoughts if I knew, I had better idea of like, okay, so the guy that killed himself, John, his suicide self. Okay, so why is it that his suicide, is this just like the idea that the worst possible outcome this is what really it made me start thinking about like this idea that angels and demons are battling in the metaverse for our current souls and self, and that's like our future self, and like in a sense like our angel and our demons could possibly be just like the weight of certain probabilities manifested as like beings, and they're like fighting it out, and there's like some sort of like psychodrama that's playing out above, and that's where like free will is actually determined, and then the reverberation comes down to us, and that's so our free will is actually like some sort of drama between these yeah, I'm kind of getting out there with this one.
No, I read you loud and clear. I think that that's exactly what's being portrayed here with this allegorical sort of spiritual warfare plot that doesn't, because what we're talking about here doesn't make any logical sense. But when you're watching it, it is kind of like pointless to question. So don't worry about getting any deeper than that, or whichever fucking way you want to, if it's deeper or higher, whatever. I think what you're saying there makes perfect sense, because I get the same sort of sense that what's going on here. And once again, it sort of comes down to the false dichotomy between the interior and the exterior, and the literal interpretation of spiritual warfare with angels and demons in this like invisible battle that's raging around us all the time. It's not around us, but it is in us, but it is also both, and it is also neither. It's
right. I think
right. It's too holistic to atomize.
Right. Here, the sense of outside is more outside of time. That's you can definitely tell that it's atemporal or whatever, but whether it's within the guy or in heaven or whatever between them, the dimensions, it's at the very least, it's very apparent that it's not within his time.
Yes, very much, which makes it seem more like a mechanical function of reality, right? Than just a sort of like an emergent or probabilistic thing that just happens spontaneously. So no, I totally get you. I am going to bleep some of that out. Good, but that whole point that we're talking about is important. Anyway, back to Jacob in the ambulance. He does say that, it's good for John to be shocked, so he realized that he's not the god of the world, and that he can't just decide things for himself, or, basically eliminate the things that he doesn't like with a wave of his hand like a god could. And that's when he brings back, he smiles and he says, we'll shake the shit out of him. Yeah. Which that I thought was really fucking cool, because take that to mean the literal thing. You grab something and you shake it till all the shit inside of it is gone. You have a clean vessel.
Yeah.
It's kind of a duh thing, but it is interesting that he brought that back to let you know that that was his plan from the get-go. Because once again, I love these types of like, what even do you call this? Like a jester character where everybody kind of like questions his intentions the whole time, but he has because he have his ambiguous, sort of flippant approach to things, but he actually has like yeah, kind of. It's sort of somebody who has like a grand plot that they decline to reveal to anybody.
Yeah, I know there's a term for it, but I don't know it.
It's definitely an archetype. You see it in all kinds of stuff, and it is one of my favorites. Just because I don't know if I identify with that or anything like that. I'm not a planner or anything like that, but I definitely do. I definitely do like watching people get confused by a guy and going along with him, even though they don't trust him. Right. Maybe that's where I identify.
You always said you were what? You were a coyote. That was your spirit animal, a coyote.
Yeah, man, and like that's the whole ambiguity to it because not even I know what I'm planning all the time. But I reckon if I can convince people to trust me and get done what I need, that it'll work out. So, or maybe I don't. Who knows? Not even me. Unpredictable, HardCorey. Except there's no real hardcore. It's all just fog and vapor in there. But anyway, Jacob says that
Patriots are in control. Patriots are in control. It's your higher self.
Is that a Metal Gear Solid 2 reference?
That's QAnon.
Oh. Okay. All right. We went two completely separate ways and hit the same point at the end. Okay. Nice. Anyway. Anyway, Jacob says that all John needs to do is embrace his shame so he can recover himself. He doesn't say it verbatim, but that was a gist of what he was talking about. Then meanwhile, let's see, where are we going here? Ink, he has gained access to the assembly, which is a very fucking creepy room. Let's talk about this room for just actually, you know what? Pass. We'll talk about it in a little bit. Right before they enter the assembly, he questions Leave, who tells him that she tells him as much as she trusts that his soul is still worth believing in. And it confuses Ink. He doesn't know what to think of all this. In the meanwhile, John wakes up in the hospital after dreaming of some happy times in his past. Turns out it's the same hospital where Emma is being kept. And because he's wavering here, this is where the incubi attack in earnest. And the three Dreambringers are trying to fight them off. There's actually kind of a cool scene. I actually really like how the incubi are portrayed here. Because it's clearly not supposed to be like real physical bodies that they're working with here. Right. It's almost like just like their faces on their screen, they're almost just like projections. And when they come to fight, they like take their screens off their face, and they're all wearing glasses that beam out all this red light. Everything they do is like, oh man, how to describe it? They look husky. They look false. Everything about them looks like false, just killing machines. Even though they don't really use weapons or anything like that, everything about them is just like so sinister. And I really like how they're portrayed. But there is a big fight scene here in the hospital that is just snooze fest. Yeah, the fight scenes suck.
Don't even remember it. I mean,
I'm sorry. But there was a big fight scene where they're basically just trying to get the incubi away from John as he's staggering through the hospital trying to find Emma. And like I said, the choreography is good if you can catch glimpses of the punches and kicks and throws and slams and stuff like that. Individually, they all look good, but it's just cut up to – it's all really rough to watch with all the lighting and everything flashing. It's just – could have been better without these, but it wouldn't have been an action movie, so we wouldn't have had an excuse to do an episode on it. So thank you. I don't know. Anyway, I did write this down. My generous read here is that these fight scenes are supposed to be more They're supposed to be more surreal and suggestive of combat than actually descriptive of like the way that a physical fight would be in like a Jackie Chan movie. But
Sure. I mean, but still, even in like let's say they were supposed to be representative of angels and demons battling it out over someone's soul or some shit like that. It just comes off like a paper thin action sequence that.
Yeah, it still looks shitty and is boring to watch.
Yeah,
the
problem for me isn't even just how shitty the fights are. It's just how narratively they just seem totally shoehorned in.
Yes, yeah. You could have fights here be good.
Sure.
That's the thing. If you had convincing fights that showed that I don't remember what the name for this is, but it's because I'm not a cinephile. Is that what they call those guys that love movies? Cinephile, I think, something like that. But there is a way of conveying narrative in a fight. It's something like wordless dialogue, but that's just something that I pulled out of my butt because I don't remember exactly what it's called. But you see it a lot of times in these old Bruce Lee movies do it really well. But you basically express what a character is thinking and feeling with the flow of the fight. You don't need to have them narrate vocally. You just express it with the actual physicality of combat.
Exactly. That's the problem with these scenes, is that there's nothing being conveyed to them except action scene, you know?
Yeah, right. People are hitting each other.
Yeah.
Because they are opposed. Okay, we get it. It could have been anything else. Could have been this and more interesting. Anyway, it does suck. We're gonna drop that one more time. This does suck. One of the Dreambringers busts out their beacon, which we saw at the beginning of the movie when Emma first got kidnapped, and it doesn't work. I don't know why it doesn't work. There's a reason for it. But Jacob, because he can't fight due to being blind, he takes off with the beacon to go try to set it somewhere so that he can support the Dreambringers in the hospital. Meanwhile, let's see, Ink leads, he's met up with the incubi at this point. He leads Leave and Emma into some kind of creepy Masonic bullshit chamber. Let's talk about this room for a second. So there are a bunch of, it looks like foil squares about a meter in diameter, and they're lining every wall. It's like a chamber of these like aluminum foil squares, which here we go with the 90 degrees being, and the square being the, platonic representation of physical reality, right? Squares represent plans, right? You don't find 90 degrees in nature, but it's the most stable form for structures, and it's the shape that we use to build and navigate the interiors and exteriors of things that we build in order to facilitate social structure and things like that. Yeah. So you've got all these squares laying posted up everywhere. There's also a bathtub in the middle of the room.
I missed that.
The bathtub? How did you miss a big porcelain bathtub? Sitting in the middle of the room, and a bell that is chimed when they come in. And there's also 4 glass cases in the corner, and each glass case contains something different. One of them, hang on, let me pull up my, here we go. In one of them are hanging clocks, and in one of them is suspended a bunch of bills, like cash money bills. And in one of them is suspended a bunch of globes of different colors. And then in one of them is suspended what looks like a human digestive system, just the organs of a digestive system.
Let me look something up real quick. But maybe this is like Saturn Central, where, how Saturn has got, the hexagram at its eye or whatever, and it sends the matrix signal to the moon as a satellite and broadcasts to encode our matrix reality to chain us to physical reality. Maybe
that's exactly what I was thinking, because the square would be like the lower emanation of that, right?
Yes.
The cube that's trapping everything. I'm pretty sure that that's exactly what was meant. And also the glass cases, they're not cubic, but they're all squared off. And also there's clocks in one, so there you have the Chronos reference. Obviously there's cash money in the other one, and like that's pretty obviously Mammon. The spheres, I had ideas, but kind of just vague insinuations about things like influence or the world itself. And they're also kind of stacked on top of each other. So it might be some kind of idea of like a sphere of influence or a world stacked upon another world, where these guys are. They're controlling. But there was nothing super clear to me about the spheres. But then there's also the organs, the digestive system was pretty obvious to you. I mean, you think of Saturn devouring, or I guess that was actually Jupiter devouring his children, wasn't it? Am I stupid?
Well, no, actually it could be both, but I know that Saturn, let me check. Saturn devouring his son.
Yeah, so it is Saturn. So there we go with this is the same thing that I was talking about earlier with the evil being a, not so much a state, but a progression of consuming in order just to subsist. And because there's not a whole human body in that case, it's just the digestive tract, right? So I don't think that's a totally random, gross thing that they put in there.
No,
I'm
what you were
sure
saying, about before, about how they're, all about dissolution of their like individuality, yet all that's left is pretty much that cancer, to feed.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And it's the same thing with I don't think the money is there just to strictly represent like material power, but money is not a stagnant like repository of power either. It needs to be constantly cycling as well.
Ooh. Interesting.
So I believe that what is all being represented in this room is the notion of evil as being a thing that entraps via that cycling, that need to perpetuate itself by consuming and producing nothing.
Yeah, the whole cycle of samsara, the Matrix type shit. Yeah.
Exactly. The bathtub creeped me the fuck out. There's just this big porcelain bathtub sitting in this chamber that is supposed to be used for a sacrifice ritual. And they never explicate on the purpose of the bathtub or show anything about what it's used for, but just the fact that there's a bathtub in there in a chamber where an execution is supposed to take place unnerved me at such a weird like baseline level that I don't even have words to try to explain the reason for it.
Yeah, I missed the bathtub. I must have not been paying attention.
Well, it's there and it's weird, and I'm not happy about it, but it was a good thing to put in there. I don't have any. I'll tell you the reason why it unnerves me so much is because unlike, the organs and the money and the clocks, I don't have a referent for it. I don't. The only thing that when I think of sacrifice or death in bathtubs, I think of like, like maybe dropping a toaster in a bathtub, but none of that really makes sense except for, you know what? There is something to that. We'll get to it in a minute.
Only bathtub that has ever mildly disturbed me is in a movie Gummo, where he's like drinking milk and eating spaghetti in this rotten ass dirty water tub. Yeah, there's nothing really inherently scary about bathtubs. The fact that there's just a freestanding one, I'll tell you what it reminded me of. One time I was playing with my band and we got a gig at a Mason hall, right? And I got a brief tour of the hall
before we got on. One of the members, which they were all nice guys, by the way. I don't actually have anything bad necessary to say about Freemason members at this point, but I did get a tour, and this place was built to withstand bombs. Like every single wall was built 3 feet thick. And was impervious to tornadoes and all this kind of stuff. So I got a little tour around the building, and when we were done, me and the sound guy actually snuck down into the basement. Or it actually wasn't the basement. The basement was where we were playing. They had their dining hall down there, but we snuck into their central auditorium. We didn't sneak in. It's not like we had to sneak past people or surpass locks or anything, but basically we went where nobody was for the event. It was not part of the event. And we got into their main auditorium where they had a big stage where they did have concerts and stuff like that. But it was an auditorium with seats on 3 sides and then a stage in the center. And out in the middle was a big flat open area. And they had all this, and I hope I don't get hunted down and killed for talking about this, but they had a bunch of stuff laying out in the center floor of the auditorium, including an Iron Maiden and an electric chair and like a desk and a table and some candelabras and stuff that I didn't even recognize. And so we left. We didn't go any further.
Jeez, doesn't get more ominous than that. It was probably.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
they were probably doing some sort of like initiation or something, and it was part of
definitely was some kind of initiation ceremony, which they, because of their whole thing, there's a lot of death and rebirth, sort of stuff going on. But that's what that bathtub reminded me of, was ominous because you don't know what the purpose is.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. I got it out of my head at this point. I'm not going to think about it anymore because, there was definitely something that bothered me about that. A guy comes out now. We never have seen this guy before, and we don't see him again, and they never name him. But he's kind of dressed up like the Incubi, except he's not wearing a mask or glasses. He's a handsome dude, clean shaven, all white and pale, much like Ink and the Incubuses. Oh my God, is that why they call him Ink? Because he's not a full Incubus yet?
So what's a U-bus?
You bussin' cherries, son.
It works. We'll go with that, I guess.
I think that's exactly what they had in mind. But this guy is extremely evocative of like a high level devil type dude. His eyes shift from normal human eyes to like full black a lot of times. Yeah. And he looks completely composed. So, and all the Incubi are obviously deferring to him.
And he has an actual face is the main difference that.
Yeah, he's not covered up at all. Yeah. He's not covered up with, like I said, no mask, no glasses, no pads, no helmets, just balls. So he rolls up and stabs Leave, her in the gut with a hooked knife. And let's see. So she drops over dying, and he tells Ink that his scars will disappear. He's going to be made perfect because he will fear no more shame, and quote, pride is what we are made of.
So, pride before the fall, being
exactly
like pride being the first sin of the fall of, Lucifer and everything.
And that first sin thing is exactly what made me think this dude is the demiurge, right?
Right, yeah.
This dude is the Luciferic presence. All the stuff in the glass cages and such, pretty much tell the whole story. But at this point, Leave is dying, and she tells Ink that he doesn't need to fear his shame because he's beautiful. It's just that he refuses to see it himself. He's super confused as he's talking to her, but when she says this, he gets hit with a whoa truth bomb. Spumoni. Yeah, he sees that he gets a glimpse of the reality excuse me, I'm belching. He gets a glimpse of the reality where he didn't get into a car crash. And instead he goes to the party to celebrate his big sale at the company while Emma dies. That's the future that Ink has been anticipating this whole time, because Ink is what became of John when he shot himself in the head.
Yeah.
He set himself up, and he's been living in the hell he created for himself the whole time. And that gigantic nose that's been sticking out of his hood, guess what? Pinocchio reference. He's been lying the entire time to himself, because the fairy in Pinocchio tells him that lies are as plain as the nose on your face.
I did not even have that connection, so nice.
Boom. So at the last instant there, Ink comes to terms with everything. That's basically it. And he pulls Emma back, and he fucking goes ham on all the incubus around him. Huge melee goes down, and the same thing is happening at the hospital. But Ink chases the incubus away, who obviously can't take Emma now that Ink doesn't consent to it. And at that same moment, Jacob activates the beacon, and all the other Dreambringers are able to teleport into the hospital and beat back the incubus dudes that are trying to get into her hospital room where John is sitting, stroking her head, hoping that she comes out of her coma. And she does. She awakens, and she says, "Daddy, am I dreaming?" And he says, "No." And that's the end.
Yeah, I had a lot more thoughts as you were going over. I must have not been paying much attention, because I definitely saw a lot more, at least potentially profound themes going on with the movie. Because I don't know how much this was thought out, but yeah, definitely a lot cooler in retrospect than most of the movie while watching it.
That's what I'm saying. I took it, I was taking everything with a grain of salt up until they got to the assembly. And like I said, the bathtub grabbed my attention immediately. I was like, I don't know why this makes my stomach feel like it's sinking, but something about this feels so gross and wrong when he tolls that bell. And then I noticed the glass cases and really, really thought about what the fuck was with what's being portrayed in those glass cases. And I was like, that's why this has been related to Gnosticism, because here we see a guy confronting the reality of what it means to willfully subsume into the Matrix.
Well, and I do think it's interesting how Gnosticism is like, even like Plato, basically recollection is knowledge. It's all about remembering things, union, and where lying to yourself is basically obscuring something through, you're covering it up, and also you're covering up unity. So,
Wow.
Remember, yeah.
Yeah, either joining with something or joining something back to yourself. Because what do we call members? Like they're functional organs of a greater whole, right?
Right. And so
wow,
remember is just like becoming whole.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, and that was the whole thing with Ink, is that he declined to remember, right?
Yeah.
That was his whole thing. The nose thing should have been obvious right off the bat, but I completely didn't think about it, I think, until we took that last pee break while we were watching the movie. It came to me. I was like, why is his nose so long? Just like the rest of him looks ratty. Like he's when he takes his hood off, he's all gray and bald and nasty looking. But they specifically went real fucking hard on giving him like an 8-inch knobbly nose.
Yeah, I thought you had that one in the bank, like from when you first watched this.
No, it just hit me almost when the movie was over, and I was like, man, where else could that have come from? Because I even looked it up while we were finishing the movie, trying to figure out where the original author of Pinocchio got the idea of a nose growing, and it appears from my cursory research, I didn't do any kind of deep investigation into it, but it appears that was the first instance where the notion of the nose growing as one lies appeared, was the original Pinocchio.
Did you ever see, I posted it in our chat like years ago, but the whole connection of Pinocchio, the fairy godmother, and Freemasonry and the star system Sirius, the star series?
Yes, I don't remember details of it, but I do remember reading about that.
Yeah, we'll have to dig that up and see if we can make any connections with that, because definitely it would be cool if we could find. I mean, this dude's probably too big business for, too big of a deal for us, but if we could like interview him and pick his brain without putting him on the spot, like ideas that maybe he was going with, though then again, a lot of this could have been just his artistic intuition.
Yeah, of course. I mean, but yeah. I would love to know. Know if he had inspiration from stuff that he'd already read about or seen, or if this was all just off the cuff.
Right.
Because that would only ultimately satisfy my own curiosity. I think the real litmus test is what you experience while you're watching it, right?
Yeah. I mean, most, like, if you interview most artists, they're going to tell you, even if they had an idea, they want you to interpret it yourself. So, I mean,
yeah, exactly. And plus, artists lie
always,
all the time. That's like their whole thing.
Yeah, always. But yeah, especially this room, I actually didn't pay much attention to the room. I don't remember the glass cases. I was only when you were describing the glass cases and what was in them, that suddenly I had the thought about like Saturn and stuff. And then you started describing more of what was going on. I was like, oh shit. Like either that was a happy accident, or I do think that dude meant... At least he was, maybe he was just pulling on a thread that's just connected to all that, and just so happened to parallel so closely.
That is way too way too much of a far shot to be coincidental, though, don't you think?
I would think, but again, it could be his little magic intuition pulling it all together too. But yeah, I think the easiest answer, the most probable, is that he totally intended it to be the whole Saturn matrix making service to self pipeline type thing,
That's exactly what it is. And we didn't even get into the Montaukeian interpretations here, but that stuff was forefront of my mind so much of the time, because obviously, like, he's got one of the most explicit Tom Montauk, that is, got one of the most explicit interpretations of the Time War as well. Was one of the things that I used Montauk as a reference for, where his whole notion was that in the future, this whole battle between good and evil, which is, that's shorthand for something that is complicated enough that you need a movie like this to explain it. But essentially, that evil is a whirlwind, not a whirlwind, but what is circling the drain of self-destruction, pulling in everything that you can find to subsist until you burn out from having nothing to devour anymore. And the whole notion of self, agency where you're able to integrate that, oh yeah, like I did things that I don't like, which means that I don't like things about myself, which means I need to come to terms with my notions of like and dislike, and how I'm able to, how I'm able to treat things that I dislike. Those are the two essential concepts that are not necessarily opposed if you go with the Tolkien interpretation, which is that one is generative and productive, and one is strictly an absence and a mockery of the other.
Yeah, there's this guy. Oh, his name escapes me, but he started out writing a bunch of books on astral projection. But Robert Monroe, I think. Anyways, he has this. He wrote books and went into these wild theories about how it's pretty close to the service to self, service to others thing, where basically, there's this stuff called loosh, which is the energy that we generate.
Right.
And basically these, like the service to self creatures, they feed on it and they generate it through us through all negative means. Whatever we have negative emotion. David Icke touches on this with the reptilians do this too. Like that negative, the negative emotions, like they actually orchestrate, things in life to, like how these guys give everyone bad dreams, and they actually feed on negative energy because it generates more sustenance for themselves. Where actually, and what the weird thought that I had, or that I made me think like, I'd never thought of it like that, was that service to others, like the pure love and good, is actually a so like the bad guys are parasitic, right? Well, actually, love is actually feeding on everything too. It's just that it's like symbiotic, and it also is, like you said, generative. But in a sense, there is also feeding going on.
Yes, yeah, because there's still sustenance there, but it's essentially drawing from an infinite resource.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, I think symbiotic versus parasitic is actually the most succinct way to talk about the good versus evil concept or model that we're trying to describe here.
Yeah.
Cause yeah, it's I mean, oh man, yeah, there's a lot, man. There's a lot to it. I don't know.
We're going off in so many directions, and
no, not really, because we were talking, because all this is in the movie. This isn't just like peripheral stuff.
Well,
really.
I'm not. I guess not necessarily so many directions. I'm just thinking, how long have we been going? Like we're gonna have like a 4-hour podcast.
We're deep enough into it that we can end any time. But yeah, I mean, I would say, throw some stuff out there. If anybody watches this movie and is confused about what's happening, and then listens to this and is even more confused, then some references out there, I guess. Check Tom Montauk, Montalk. He's got he's got the ideas about that. You just check out and you just read the Wikipedia article on Gnosticism generally for some jumping off points. I do want to point out how interesting it was that they introduced the, boss of the incubi as a dude who has a beautiful face that he doesn't cover, because that's the perfect representation of like the peacock angel, right? And how better can you interpret pride? And also, obviously, the demiurge maintains their power over, their principality, besides illusion, like by convincing people that not just that there are things worth gaining in the world, like the drifters, right, who were obsessed with their vices, and so they weren't able to pass on to become storytellers or whatever, but by his actual servants are those who were completely unable to even cope with what they wanted. All they could do is fixate on blaming others for their hurt. which if you get into like the actual deep lore of like the demiurgic Abraxas and all that kind of stuff, you start to see why a character like that could be interpreted that way. Does that make sense at all? I'm being general because I'm not trying to be like a theology podcast right now, and also I don't know enough about it to actually be informative.
No, I think
so.
I think it works with the movie too, because it's just all, very vague. It just kind of gives you ideas to bounce off of, so yeah, it's hard to say how much any of this actually what I do like about the movie is that it just it took after the movie for it to register, but just the fact that it actually stimulates a lot of different thoughts. That's at least it's successful in that, where it's got some ideas. Even I wouldn't even say it necessarily for sure has ideas itself, but there's something. It at least is makes you think that there could be those ideas there, so it might as well.
Yeah, it's a rare type of movie that makes you think of bigger things.
Yeah,
it's not a self-contained universe. It's rather a pad from which you can jump off and go explore like many other things, even if just in your own mind, because of the ideas that it gives you.
Yes.
So yeah, well, that's Ink. That's 2009's Ink. Any final thoughts?
No, I think we covered. Well, I say that we covered everything, but easily probably could go on for hours more.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's just the kind of movie this is. We made enough references that if anybody is that interested, they've got stuff to check out after that. But I will go ahead and pass the ultimate judgment here. Technically, not a good movie.
No, not whatsoever.
However, a movie that I would recommend to anybody.
Well, I don't know if I would recommend it to anyone, because even like definitely most of the movie, and it wasn't until the end that I was even like intrigued, and it wasn't until after the movie and I thought about it that I was like, actually, there's some cool shit going on there. It's really the kind of thing where it's just like abstractly, like if you don't put thought into what's going on, then there's not stuff in the movie to really carry a lot of weight, I don't think. But if you think about it and bounce, like people that haven't read shit that we have and have these ideas already in them, I don't know that they would get a lot of cool ideas from it.
That's always a possibility. But the thing that my only counterpoint is basically that the thing about Gnosticism, right, is that it's an inherent truth that you find in yourself.
Sure, yeah.
And so seeing it reflected in somebody else's creative process can be a big time motivating factor for you to go out and actually do stuff on your own.
Sure, yeah, I'll concede to that.
So I would still recommend anybody to watch this movie, except people who
like
yeah. Some people are just not going to get it, and that's fine. It's got the potential to activate some real generative thoughts, even though we don't have any idea where they come from.
No.
In almost anybody that watches it, because and also it's just a nice story, because ultimately it's a story about a dude who comes to terms with loving his daughter over his career. Right? It's about a dude learning to not be selfish.
Yes.
There's an extremely simple moral not buried.
That is the emotional crux of how it conveys its ideas. Yeah.
Yeah, that is the central idea. Is that you can heal yourself by caring for others more than your own success.
Yeah.
Or conversely, that your own success won't heal you from your lack of care for others. It goes both ways, which is, expressed in the whole non-linearity of the spiritual realm that's in the cosmology of the movie. But anyway, yeah. So interesting watch, interesting stuff to talk about for sure. We've wanted to get into more esoteric, weird stuff. So hey, if you like this kind of thing and you want to hear us waffle on about more schizophrenic bullshit, then let us know, because we've got other movies, that we can talk about that aren't strictly action oriented. But if this kind of thing is interesting to anybody, it's interesting to us, and we want to find that Venn diagram. So definitely let us know in comments. You can always reach out to us directly at no uncertain terms prod at gmail.com. And of course, you can leave comments on, I think, wherever you find this. I haven't really checked what all the different podcast streaming services look like. I don't care that much. But on Spotify, you can always leave us comments. We've got a link where you can send messages to us. We'll read them straight from there. What else? Oh, yeah. We do have music out from No Uncertain Terms Productions. If you just search No Uncertain Terms Productions, you'll find our link tree. And we do have nutprod.com. You can go there to check our stuff. We've got some T-shirts for sale. You can find my music specifically under Skew Composite. It's linked in all the stuff there, the YouTube channel and everything. Jake wasn't with us today, but hey, happy birthday, Jake. He just turned 18. It's going to be late by the time that you hear this, but hey, you're able to buy a gun now. Go out and do some good for the world. Yeah, hell yeah. Terabond is his music. You can find that stuff really good, interesting, instrumental, a little bit of a tongue twister there. And also Isaac isn't with us, but he was there for the whole last month, and you can find his stuff at Get Six. You've probably already heard some of it. He's got his music all over the place. And we've got some more music coming out pretty soon by our other dude who wasn't here, Brandon. He's busy with stuff right now. But check out this is just a sizzle, I guess. Don't have any links out yet, but we've got some interesting stuff in the oven. Big names involved. Some real big names. Barack Obama. Yeah, Barack Obama. Nelson Mandela. Yeah, big names. Lady Gaga. Does that ring a bell? Yeah. They don't have anything to do with his music, but those are some big names. So keep an eye out. And I guess that's it. I'm going to say fuck on and live. And Chris, you take us out.
It ain't my tragedy.